Have you ever wondered why the more you give, the less people seem to notice? Why your kindness, offered so freely, so often, quietly turns into something expected and then ignored? You're the one who shows up without being asked, the one who says yes, even when you're running on empty, the one who carries burdens no one sees, simply because it's easier than letting others down. But there's a hidden cost to always being available. And it doesn't just drain your energy, it erases your presence. This isn't a gentle reminder to set boundaries. It's a mirror, a still, unflinching look at what happens when kindness becomes your cage. When your desire to be good turns into a reason you're no longer seen. Today, we're not here to shame your giving heart, but to protect it. To understand how real strength isn't in being endlessly open, but in knowing when to hold yourself back. So if any part of this feels uncomfortably familiar, stay with me. We're about to explore the quiet truth no one tells the kindest people, and once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Number 1. Too present, too forgotten. Let's talk about what happens when your kindness becomes your costume. You give, you show up, you make yourself useful before anyone even asks, and the world doesn't applaud. It just gets used to it. What you believe is generosity, the world perceives as surrender. And the more you offer yourself without pause or limit, the more you vanish in plain sight. You've mistaken virtue for availability, and in doing so, you've blurred yourself into the background. People don't notice what's always there. They lean on it, they exploit it, but they rarely respect it. Because what they see too often, they begin to take for granted. And when you're always present, always ready, always saying yes, you become predictable. And in the human mind, what's predictable becomes invisible. We live in a world that doesn't cherish constant goodness. It respects what holds its shape. It admires what is rare. Stillness, boundaries, and self-respect create gravity. The Stoics understood this. True virtue isn't about being endlessly accessible. It's about being in command of your presence. Imagine a friend who is always free, always saying whatever you want. Over time, people stop asking what they think, not because they dislike them, but because they've learned this person doesn't offer resistance, depth, or presence with weight. But then think about that one quiet friend, the one who doesn't show up often, but when they do, everyone listens. Not because they try harder, but because they don't scatter their presence. They measure it. You see, being everywhere, giving endlessly, drains your value not because your value disappears, but because your boundaries do. The world responds not to your intentions, but to how clearly you live them. And when you live without protecting your energy, you signal that it's free to take. Not treasured, not earned, just available. And when something is always available, it loses its shape in the eyes of others. That's not because people are cruel. It's because human nature moves toward what resists, what stands, what defines itself. So ask yourself, is your constant kindness a reflection of your strength, or a mask for fear of being forgotten if you stop serving? Because when you live only to be useful, you become a tool, not a person. And when you're a tool, no one wonders how you feel. They only wonder if you're working. At the end of the day, being good isn't about disappearing for others. It's about standing firm in who you are and letting your light reach others without letting them extinguish it. Number 2, give with limits. Let's talk about what happens when your kindness forgets to bring a shield. When you keep giving without limits, not because you're strong, but because you've never been taught where to stop. You're not here to save everyone. You're here to guard the fire inside you. And if you let it burn for everyone, everywhere, all the time. You'll wake up one day and find there's nothing left to keep you warm. How many evenings have you collapsed in silence, feeling emptied for reasons you can't quite name? How many relationships have left you drained, not because they demanded too much, but because you never demanded anything back? It's not that the world is cruel by design. It's that you haven't drawn the line. When you don't set limits, people don't know how far they can go. And like children without guidance, they'll push, just to see where you break. And when you finally collapse from carrying what no one else was asked to hold, they won't say, "What a generous heart." They'll whisper, "Something's off with them," and move on. That's how it works. The Stoics knew virtue means strength, not self-erasure. If your goodness is blind, it stops being noble and starts becoming self-betrayal. Wisdom isn't in how much you give. It's in how well you guard what's worth giving. Picture someone like Eli, the friend who always says yes. Need help moving? He's there. Need to borrow money? He won't even ask when you'll return it. At first, people admire him, but slowly they stop asking how he is. They stop noticing when he's tired, because they assume he'll just show up, no matter what. And when the day comes that he finally says no, he's met not with gratitude, but with confusion and distance. Why? Because he never taught anyone that his energy had value. Because he offered himself like air, essential but unnoticed. And in doing so, he became invisible. When people see that you're always there, always giving, they don't have to earn your time. They don't have to reach for you. And when no effort is required, respect slowly dies. What once was precious becomes routine. What once inspired awe becomes easy. And connection without reverence becomes emptiness in disguise. At the end of the day, being good isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about having the courage to protect your energy, to give it only where it's honored, and to remember what burns too freely burns out too fast. Number 3, let absence speak. Let's talk about something no one teaches you, the strength of stepping back. If you want to be valued, learn to disappear. Learn to pause before responding. Learn to say no without guilt. Learn to prioritize your energy like it's sacred, because it is. Respect is not born from how much you're present, but from how wisely you choose when to be. Those who are respected, admired, even feared, they're not everywhere, all the time. They understand the Stoic art of presence. They don't chase applause, they appear with intention. They give, yes, but only when it matters, only when it's theirs to give. And above all, they know when to stop. If you feel unseen lately, it's not because the world is blind. It's because you've been shining too constantly, too generously without pause. You've lost the mystery, the stillness that gives meaning to your light. You've been so present that your absence no longer surprises anyone. And in that, you haven't just lost their attention, you've lost a part of yourself. Because when you spend your life showing up for everyone else, you forget to show up for yourself. Picture it this way. Elena is the person who always replies immediately, always shows up, always says yes. She's dependable, but slowly people stop checking in on her. They stop appreciating her presence because they assume it's a given. But one day, Elena chooses differently. She takes a week for herself. She doesn't answer every call. She lets silence speak. And the response? People notice. Not because she was loud, but because she finally stopped being background noise. She became deliberate. Scarcity made her presence meaningful again. Stoic wisdom tells us that self-mastery isn't just about discipline in action, it's about restraint in presence. Fire that never rests becomes smoke. A light that never dims stops inspiring. You can't guide others if you've burned out your own clarity. You can't love well if you've abandoned yourself in the process. The noblest act sometimes is not giving more. It's protecting the source from which giving flows. So if it hurts that they ignore you, ask yourself, how much space have you left for others to miss you? If it costs you to draw a boundary, ask, how much is your peace worth? Because when you give everything, all the time, you become the landscape, ever present, but no longer seen. At the end of the day, it's not about becoming distant, it's about becoming deliberate, and those who master their presence master their worth. Number 4. Withdraw to reclaim. Let's talk about the power of disappearing, not as an act of revenge, but as an act of return. When you step back from the noise, from the roles you've been performing, from the obligations that were never yours to carry, you don't vanish. You remember. You begin again. Start today. Stay silent. Observe. Withdraw without the need to explain or defend. Let your absence speak. See who notices. See who misses the version of you they assumed would always be there. Because right there, in that quiet void, is where your value starts to rebuild. This isn't about manipulation. It's about restoration. Stoicism teaches us that the wise do not scatter their presence like dust. They move with intention, they give with reason, and they disappear not out of resentment, but out of self-command. As long as you remain constantly available, you'll never have space to hear your own voice. And if you're never available for yourself, then all your kindness becomes self-betrayal. Think of someone like Daniel. He's always on call for others, whether it's a friend's late-night crisis, a co-worker's forgotten deadline, or a sibling's emotional storm. People admire him, but they also expect him. One day, Daniel turns off his phone. He takes 3 days without responding, without updating, without showing up. And suddenly, the people around him begin to shift. Some grow silent, others grow distant. A few, only a few, reach out, not to ask for help, but simply to ask if he's okay. And that tells him everything. Because when you're no longer useful, the truth of who values you emerges. You weren't born to be a background character in everyone else's life. You weren't made to be an option, a convenience, a permanent yes. You were meant to be felt, meant to be remembered. But only when your presence becomes a choice, not a given. So learn to offer yourself with care. Make others wait. Not out of pride, but because what is rare is respected. What appears with silence speaks the loudest. And when you disappear, let the world feel your absence. Let it learn in hindsight the ease with which it overlooked what should have been honored. True respect begins not when you're always there, but when you're willing to step away and choose yourself first. At the end of the day, self-worth is not proclaimed, it's reclaimed in the stillness where no one is watching and everything real begins. Number 5. Expect nothing. Let's talk about a quiet habit that steals your peace, giving what no one asked for, then feeling hurt when nothing comes back. It sounds generous, it even feels noble, but every time you anticipate someone's needs, every time you fix a problem that wasn't yours, every time you say yes before they even ask, you plant a hidden expectation. You start to believe the world owes you something in return. A thank you, some loyalty, a deeper connection. But here's the truth. No one agreed to that exchange. There was no shared pact. You wrote the contract, signed it in silence, and waited for others to fulfill it. This is where Stoicism clears the fog. The wise give because it's right, not because it will be rewarded. If your virtue is real, it doesn't need applause. But when your kindness becomes a currency, an unspoken attempt to buy worth, you'll always end up disappointed. You'll feel betrayed, not because others failed you, but because you offered something with strings, even if those strings were invisible. Take Anna, for example. She always shows up first. She remembers birthdays, plans gatherings, helps people move house. And yet, when she needed support, her phone stayed silent. No one returned the favor. She felt angry, even ashamed. But when she looked closer, she realized she hadn't been giving from peace. She'd been giving to matter, to belong, to feel seen. And when that didn't come, she felt erased. But no one had promised her anything. They had just received what she offered. Here's the deeper lesson. Sometimes giving becomes a way to maintain control. You're the helper, the fixer, the one who knows what others need. But that role isn't always rooted in wisdom. It can be rooted in fear. The fear of being irrelevant unless you're useful. The fear of having no identity unless you're needed. And that fear binds you to others in a way that looks like kindness, but feels like dependency. You don't have to stop being generous, but you must stop confusing generosity with self-worth. Your value doesn't come from what you do for others. It comes from how deeply you honor yourself, even in stillness. At the end of the day, if you truly want peace, give without expecting, help without controlling, and love without needing it to be noticed. Because the only gift worth giving is the one that asks for nothing in return. Number 6. You're not just useful. Let's talk about what happens when your sense of self is built entirely on being needed. You've been the reliable one for so long, the one who fixes, who rescues, who shows up without being asked, that you've forgotten who you are without a crisis. The day you say no, the silence feels like panic. Not because others stop needing you, but because you don't know how to exist without proving your value through service. But here's the truth. You weren't born to chase other people's emergencies. You were born to tend your own fire, to burn in your own direction. When usefulness becomes your identity, you begin to attract people who only see your hands, not your heart. They value what you do, not who you are. And slowly, without noticing, you start living under an unspoken rule. You must always perform. You must always help. You must never rest. Because if you stop, who are you? If you disappear, what are you worth? Take Alex, for example. In every friendship and relationship, he's the dependable one. The one who remembers the details, handles the logistics, carries the emotional weight. But when Alex finally burns out and stops initiating, stops fixing, something strange happens. The calls stop. The messages go quiet. Not because people stopped loving him, but because they never learned how to love him when he wasn't being useful. They only knew the version of him that gave without limit. And the harshest realization, Alex had grown attached to that version too. It made him feel strong, in control, needed. But it was a false kind of power, one rooted not in virtue, but in fear. Fear that without utility, he would be invisible. That without being essential, he would be forgotten. This isn't strength, it's servitude in disguise. And the Stoics would remind us, true worth is not conditional. It doesn't rise and fall with how much others need you. It remains steady because it is defined within. So here's the question. When will you start valuing yourself? Not for what you do, but for who you are, even in stillness. When will you allow yourself to be loved? Not for your usefulness, but for your essence. At the end of the day, You are not here to be a tool for others' comfort. You are here to live deliberately, to give with wisdom, and to know your worth even when your hands are still. Number 7. Stop performing. Let's talk about the quiet erosion that happens when you live to be convenient. There's a hard Stoic truth worth facing. What is not defended is degraded. What does not set a boundary slowly disappears. And maybe without realizing it, you've been your own saboteur, offering yourself endlessly, saying yes even when your chest tightens, smiling through exhaustion as if nothing's wrong. But something is wrong. Because each time you betray what you feel, something inside you fractures, and with enough fractures, even steel gives way. The Stoics taught that self-respect begins where fear ends. If you want to regain dignity, you must first reclaim discomfort. Say no where you once caved. Stay silent where you once rushed in to fix. Be absent, not to punish, but to purify. Because when you stop performing, the truth starts to surface. You'll see who stays when you're not entertaining. You'll see who values your presence, even when it's not wrapped in service. That moment, stripped of utility, is where real love and respect reveal themselves. Think about Sarah. She was always the one who remembered birthdays, who picked up the phone at midnight, who rearranged her life to fit around everyone else's. But one year, she didn't. She didn't plan the gathering. She didn't say yes to the extra favor. And one by one, people faded. But not all. The ones who mattered stayed. The rest? They were never there for her, only for what she offered. And yes, when you stop being convenient, some people will leave. But that's not loss, it's cleansing. And after cleansing comes clarity, air, stillness, power, the kind you can build on. You've been told that taking care of yourself is selfish, that choosing rest over rescue is weakness. But that's not stoicism, that's survival. No one will run into the fire to save you if you keep throwing yourself into it first. No one will choose you if you keep leaving yourself last. So let this be the line in the sand. From now on, stop trying to be useful. Start choosing to be real. Because the real you might be quieter, might be less agreeable, but they are whole, they are strong, and above all, they are finally free. At the end of the day, your life was never meant to be a service. You were meant to be someone who breathes on your own terms, and in doing so, reminds others how to breathe too. Number 8. Begin again quietly. Let's talk about that moment when everything inside you says, I can't go back to who I was. You're not reaching a conclusion. You're standing at a threshold. What happens next isn't closure, it's creation. You've come too far to keep hiding behind the sentence, I've always been like this. No, you've been taught to be like this. Through quiet sacrifices, polite silences, fear of disappointing others, and the weight of masks worn to keep the peace. But the Stoics remind us, the only peace worth keeping is the one that aligns with your truth. And now you have the rare and brutal gift of beginning again, without apology. Look around. Most people are exhausted from pretending. They shapeshift to belong, overextend to be accepted, and shrink themselves not to disturb the waters. But you've made it here because something in you refused to stay small. That quiet part inside, tired of being the support role, the fixer, the background, wants to step forward, not to please, but to breathe, not to serve, but to live. And here's the hidden truth about change. It's not loud. It's not even dramatic. It's silent. The silence left behind when you stop laughing to make others comfortable. The stillness that appears when you no longer explain your worth. When you stop being everyone's emotional distraction, the room grows quiet, and finally, you can hear your own voice. Unfiltered, clear, yours. Think of someone like Min. For years he was the go-to person, always available, always adjusting, until one day he stopped apologizing. He didn't make announcements, he just stepped back. Friends were confused, some disappeared, others waited. But Min didn't break, he rebuilt. He didn't explain, he observed. And slowly, he found that the ones who stayed without needing something were the ones who saw him, not just his usefulness. So yes, this next chapter will disturb others. You'll annoy, you'll disappoint, you'll walk away from bonds built on the lie that you were limitless. But that discomfort, it's sacred, because you cannot build your truth on ground that was never yours. From this point forward, withdraw without asking permission. Protect your silence like a fortress. Let them wonder. Let them reach. Let them feel what you once gave away too easily. And in that space, reclaim not just your voice, but your identity. At the end of the day, this is not your ending. It's the raw beginning of a self no longer shaped by convenience, but by courage. What you've just heard wasn't a message, it was a mirror. And if you've stayed until this point, it's because something inside you is no longer willing to stay invisible. Something in you is waking up. Before you go, leave a mark, not for me, but for yourself. Type "choose silence" in the comments, not as a performance, but as a quiet vow. A small step toward choosing your presence more deliberately. If this stirred something in you, made you pause, reflect, or even ache a little, don't rush past it. Let it sit. Let it shape you. And when you're ready to go further, hit subscribe. Not out of habit, but as a reminder, you're not alone in this. We're walking through this fire together, one insight at a time. And now, step back, not to vanish, but to be seen more clearly. Disappear not in bitterness, but in strength. Let them feel the absence of the version of you that was always available. And when you return, let it be with stillness, clarity, and eyes that no longer beg to be understood. The one who dares to walk away also learns to return, unchanged by the noise, but unshakable from within. Rest for now. Breathe deeply. You've just begun a quieter kind of power. The next chapter is waiting, and so am I.